All right, so this is going to be episode 4 of my deck profile videos for this format for the Brilliant Stars to Prismatic Evolutions format. Now, I mentioned in my other episodes, I don't think it's the Brilliant Stars to Prismatic Evolutions format. I think it's Brilliant Stars to Surge of Sparks because Prismatic Evolutions is just a special set, so it's not meant to usher in a new format, basically. So for this episode, we're going to be covering some of my Pikachu EX lists. So Pikachu EX is a card that came out in Surge and Sparks. It was basically the mascot for the set. You want to call it that? And so this card was, went for as most mascots or chase cards for a set go. They're usually very powerful compared to other cards in the set. And so Pikachu is no different. Pikachu is a very powerful card. Probably one of the most powerful cards printed in a very long time, probably since Lugia V Star, in my opinion, in terms of a chase card for a set. And so when this card came out, I was very impressed with its design, honestly. I think it was really well thought out. And it was a really good card to introduce at such a very difficult time in standard format, right? So we all know Pikachu. You know, if you know Pokemon, you know Pikachu, right? There's no getting around that, right? So this card doesn't really need any introduction, but for the purpose of the trading card game, I'll kind of give a uh short summary of this card. So it has the ability Resolute Heart. It reads, if this Pokemon has full HP and will be knocked out by damage from an attack, it is not knocked out, and its remaining HP becomes 10. Right? So basically, it has the uh, ability that usually goes on a card like a tool card, for example. Most recently, we've had the card Survival Brace get printed as an A spec that does the same thing. And in I think it was Furious Fist, XY Furious Fist, they printed Focus Sash, which did the exact same thing, but I think it was only for fighting Pokemon, if I'm not mistaken. So this one is just an ability on the card. So it's a very, very powerful ability that you don't have to do something like attach a tool card to get it. So that means you can do other stuff with tool cards on top of that, right? So this really powerful ability. Then it has the ability. Then it has the attack Topaz Bolt for a grass, lightning, and a metal. You do 300 damage, and then you discard 3 energy from this Pokemon. Right? So very, very powerful attack, right? Especially in a format that still has Pokemon V Stars. Pokemon V Stars generally their max HP is about 280. So this thing can one shot every single Pokemon V Star that's meta. Lugia V Star, Regidrago, right? And so very, very devastating attack, very devastating ability that you can't one shot it. And so this card is very powerful, right? And so, when this card got released, there was a lot of hype around it. But then when the card got announced, there was a lot of hype around it. But when the card got released, the card didn't really see much play, right? People didn't really put the work in to come up with really strong lists for it, right? and so ultimately the card got relegated as a tech in decks that we've already seen, right? So we've seen some lists with Regigigas, with the Reggies, as the deck is called, and we've seen some lists with the Lost Zone cards, the cards that were printed in Lost Origin, right? Other than that, this card really hasn't seen any play um in any other archetypes or in any other way, basically, right? And so this card has a lot of potential, right? Just the attack and the ability alone make this card very, very strong as like a surprise factor. And considering also that it's electric too, sorry, lightning. Um, this card can combo well with a lot of cards that are in the format that are that support lightning Pokemon, right? So I'm gonna go over some of the lists that I've come up with for this format. And so I'll just kind of cover what they were trying to do with Pikachu EX first, and I'll go through the list, right? So Pikachu has the ability Topaz attack Topaz Bolt for grass, lightning, and metal, like I mentioned. And so this is a very hard attack to charge up. And so to support it, they printed this card, right? They printed the Magneton, also from Surgeon Sparks, has the ability Overvolt Discharge. Once during your turn, you may attach it to 3 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your Lightning Pokemon in any way you like. Use this ability, this Pokemon is knocked out. Right? So this ability knocks out the Magneton on your board, similar to something like Dusclops or Dusknoir. And then you attach 3 light basic energies from your discard pile to your Lightning Pokemon, right? So the idea is that you can charge up Pikachu EX in one turn using Overvolt Discharge, basically, right? So pretty cool combo, right? Especially considering that the way Pikachu is designed is that it's not supposed to be able to be knocked out in one turn, right? So being just taking a prize, giving your opponent a prize to charge this thing up and attack is no skin off your back, basically, because you're not going to be worried about them taking like a massive prize lead because they're not going to be able to knock out your Pikachu in any traditional means, right? So that's kind of the design of this combo, and so that's generally what they're trying to accomplish with this card, right? So that's very powerful, right? You can just um, set up your board, and you can just basically take a free big prize without any drawbacks, in theory, right? So that's generally what they're trying to accomplish with this combo. And so you just want to set it up and then just try to win through that, basically, right? So I'm gonna kind of go over some lists that I came up with. So the first list I'm gonna go over is actually the list that I played at Toronto. So I decided to play Pikachu after extensive testing because throughout my testing, um, well, to kind of give a short uh summary of my testing, I was basically just testing all the meta decks in the format against other archetypes that I wanted to play at Toronto, and so I was just trying to. My goal basically when I was testing was to basically find an archetype that would give me an edge against meta decks in the format, basically, right? So I went through a lot of decks. I went through decks like Kingdra, went through decks like Espathra, Alakazam. at one point, really just trying to edge out my opponent on paper, of course, not actually throughout the game, right? And so those lists I find as like powerful as they were, the issue is mainly that they required a lot of setup and a lot of scaling to be successful. So I didn't want to be playing long games because historically at regionals and in best of three formats, I've been um pretty unfortunate with my opponents in particular, and in just generally my own playstyle. So I didn't want to relive history in the sense that I play a deck that's slower and go to time, basically, right? Like run out of time and have to play turns and probably get a tie, right? I really just wanted to just either win or lose because I feel like in best of three, that's your best bet is to win or lose because ties can really mess up the tournament standings, basically, right? So I got to Pikachu probably about 2 weeks before the event. Pretty unfortunately, honestly, because I wanted to get a lot more tests on it for sure. And thankfully, before I was got to Pikachu, I tested Miraidon lists too, so I had some experience with Lightning decks in that format. So it wasn't like much of a learning curve, but I definitely wish that I got more time testing Pikachu. And so when I got to Pikachu, I felt very confident that this was going to be a good list to give me an edge against my opponent. And to kind of explain what I mean by an edge before I continue, I'm basically trying to say that there's an aspect of my deck that my opponent needs to respect, whatever deck they're playing, basically, right? So, for example, I mentioned I tested decks like Kingdra, Alakazam, and particularly Palafin as well as two, and Espathra. And I feel like out of all those decks, the only deck that I really felt like my opponent needed to respect was Palafin because Palafin has that big HP and it has that very low maintenance attack, right? So if you can't maneuver around the Palafin, then you know you're gonna be facing down a full HP Palafin, you know, and I have a big hand size, right? So I think Palafin was the only other deck that I think I would have probably played at Toronto because of that. But with Pikachu, it's a edge that goes a step further because now it's something that you can't play around, right? Because with something like Palafin, it just has high HP, right? So you could just do a lot of damage and get around that, right? With Pikachu, it doesn't matter how much damage you do, it's going to survive the attack, right? So that is much of a more preferable edge than I would want because compared to something like Palafin, right? So I decided on Pikachu, and um, yeah. So I mentioned that I decided on it about 2 weeks before the event, and honestly, I wish I had more time because I feel like I could have put a lot more work into my Pikachu list and probably done a lot better than I did. And so that's something I definitely regret for sure. And I made a lot of sacrifice, definitely, um, leading up to the event in terms of just not just jumping onto a list that I feel like is just gonna win it, and just actually really doing the research into the formats so I can understand the formats much better, so that I don't feel a lot more anxiety and fear about going into the event and hitting a deck that I don't want to hit. So um yeah, there's a lot of aspects of my testing before the event that affected my results. Basically, is what I want to say. Right. So this is the list I played at Toronto, and I feel like this list gave me the best edge for the format. So I'm just gonna go over it. So obviously we start with the Pikachu's. We went over this card already, like two copies. And so the idea behind playing two is that Pikachu EX is basically a combo deck, basically, right? So like I explained with Trempow, uh basically you're just you're not trying to, flood the board with Pikachus. You're trying to use the Pikachu to facilitate taking knockouts, basically. If I had to um, summarize it, basically, right? So I played two copies, and the reason why I play two copies compared to, for example, a deck like Chempow where I play three is that Pikachu EX is a very much more easy Pokemon to support than Chempow. Chempow is just 220 HP basic, so it's not a Pokemon that's going to be lasting a long time, right? So you're going to need multiple copies to keep it going, right? Compared to Pikachu EX, right, which has its ability to survive an attack that would knock it out, right? So this thing is going to last a long time, and you're going to get a lot of value out of one Pikachu EX. So you don't need multiple copies. So I only play two, right? So then I play two of the Magnemites. Play two of the Magnemite from Surging Sparks, just because this one, all the Magnemites, I believe, are 60 HP in this format. So 60 HP or less. And so it's pretty arbitrary which Magnemite you choose. But this one has the best attack. Lightning Energy, attack Lightning Ball, does 20 damage, right? So this could set up, you know, if you want to attack like a Dreepy, for example, if you have to attack for some reason, you could set up 20 damage on it, and then when they evolve into Dragapult, then you can just knock it out with Topaz Bolt, right? So then I played two Magneton, gone over this card already. And so the idea is that Magneton is a combo piece, and it's not going to be lasting on the board, right? So you're only going to probably use max two per game, and you're gonna, if you need to use more than two, I mean more than one, you'll just have the second one just in case, right? So it's not necessarily something that you're gonna do every single game due to Magneton. So just play the minimum copy that you need, two, so you could do a maximum of two per game, right? So that's the Magneton counts. And for this list, we play Noctows. So these are Hoots I play. If you've seen the Terapagos video, play the Hoots from Temporal Forces, 70 HP. Two colorless energies got the silent wind attack for 20 damage. Your opponent reveals their hand, right? So pretty good attack compared to the other Hoots from Stellar Crown. The attack triple stab, 30 damage, 10x. Flip three coins, attack does 10 damage for each set, right? So no reason to just be playing the odds game. This is a combo deck, so this attack is pretty cool, right? So play three Noctows. See my Terrapagos video, you notice what this card does. Jewel Seeker, once during your turn, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, if you have any Tera Pokemon in play, you may search your deck for up to two trainer cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Right? So you have to evolve it from your hand to use the ability. So something like uh I don't think there's anything in this format that evolves a Pokemon from your deck. Um Something like Grand Tree. right? Um, if you try to use Grand Tree to evolve this thing, then you wouldn't get the ability, right? So you have to evolve it from your hand just to make that clarification. All right, so I play 3 copies of it, and it's because when this deck is set up, it pretty much just flows pretty smoothly after that. So you don't need to play a heavy count of Noctowl compared to Terrapagos, which relies on having a lot of bench space. So you can just play 4/4 Noctowl in Terrapagos compared to uh in this deck, which doesn't really need that 4/4 spot, right? So I play 3 copies just so I can hit them. All right. Then play one Miraidon EX from Scarlet Violet base set. Has the ability Tandem Unit. Once during your turn, you may search your deck for up to 2 basic lightning Pokemon and put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck, right? So this card got printed with Miraidon EX, Scarlet and Violet base set too. And Miraidon's ability, um, and I'll explain why I'm reading this, has the ability Dino Cry. Once during your turn, you attach up to 2 basic fighting energy cards from your discard pile to your basic fighting Pokemon in any way you like. If you use this ability, your turn ends, right? So they both have abilities centered around targeting 2 pieces, right? So this one targets from your deck, this one targets from your discard pile, right? So very powerful abilities. Difference is that Koraidon's ability, when it uses it, your turn ends. But Miraidon's ability, you can continue your turn after you use Tandem Unit, right? So people played Miraidon more than they played Koraidon because of this, because it was more easy to set up very. Basically, they used it more because you could set up more cheesy boards, basically. It had nothing to do with Miraidon's power level compared to Koraidon's power level. Koraidon has some very powerful combos that you can do. So there's no reason why people should be playing Miraidon more than Koraidon. It's just it's a more cheesy card, basically, right? But not to digress. Um, Miraidon ability targets 2 basic lightning Pokemon, and in this deck, you just happen to have 2 lightning Pokemon that combo together, right? So this card is very powerful in this deck. You can just drop it. You can get your Magnemite and your Pikachu, and you're set for next turn, basically, right? So the other lightning Pokemon we play one Iron Hands EX. If you've been playing uh standard format of the Pokemon trading card game since this card came out in Paradox Rift, you're very familiar with this card. Has 2 attacks. First attack arm press for 2 lightnings and a colorless, so that's 160. Then its second attack, very notorious attack, amp you very much for a lightning and 3 colorless energies, does 120 damage. Your opponent's Pokemon is knocked out by damage from this attack, take 1 more prize card, right? So we've seen attacks like this historically throughout the game. Um, and they generally are pretty powerful attacks and pretty popular attacks in different archetypes. This one particular is particularly strong because it only needs one type of specific energy to charge up. So theoretically, you can play this deck card in a lot of decks as long as you can just charge it up, right? A very efficient manner, right? So this deck is seen play in decks like Lugia, even decks like Chempao, which I don't agree with, but um, this card has been successful in a lot of decks, right? And so um, the attack is just very powerful, right? It's very good at taking a prize lead and winning in um a very unnatural way. That's very unnatural to the card game, or at least unnatural to the format. And so, playing one um is very strong, right? Especially because you can charge it up in 1 turn with Overvolt Discharge and an attachment for turn. So that's kind of the idea of playing this card, right? So then you play one of the minion V. So has the ability Luminous Sign. When you play this Pokemon, your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may search your deck for a supporter card, reveal it and put it into your hand. Then shuffle your deck, right? So a deck with not a lot of draw power, and a deck that plays a lot of powerful supporters, as we'll get into, and a deck that has a lot of deck space. Those are three things that Dominion V really strives in if that deck needs those things. And so sorry. And so yep, you just play one copy. Even though you can't even attack with it, you can just use it and you have a lot of bench space, so it doesn't really matter, right? We'll get into the trainer cards and kind of explain that. So then you play one Squawk ability EX. So has the ability Squawk and Seize. Once during your first turn, you may discard your hand and discard 6 cards and draw 6 cards. You can't use more than one Squawk and Seize ability during your turn. So this card very strong to set up your board basically. And kind of explain when I get to trainer cards, what was I trying to accomplish by playing this card in this deck. So the last lightning Pokemon we play is Elekid from Paradox Rift. So it has the attack Crackling Shot. So it's this symbol indicates that the attack is free, basically, so you don't need any energy to use it. And this attack does 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Right, so 30 damage anywhere on the board. And so this attack is very good in this deck because going into this tournament, particularly, um, the two probably decks to beat were Regidrago and Charizard. So both those decks play the baby Pokemon Cleffa, right? So basically, they're trying to set up their board without giving up one of their main pieces, right? So the main idea behind playing this card is that you can basically um, knock out a Cleffa without having to use something that you're trying to attack with later, like a Pikachu, right? And the second idea behind playing this card is that it does 30 damage, right? So um again, right, you're trying to beat Charizard, and Charizard has 330 HP. So you can use this card to put 30 damage onto a Charmander or onto a Charizard, and then Pikachu can just one shot it basically. Right? And it also messes up their prize trade because they have to knock it out. So this card does a lot of good things, right? Also, the other reason why I played this card is that um, in Scarlet and Violet, they've been printing a lot of baby Pokemon. And throughout my testing, I tested a lot of baby Pokemon in a lot of decks. And so I came to the conclusion that Pokemon was actually trying to make baby Pokemon like an actual meta, basically. And so to lean more into what they were trying to accomplish by printing those cards, I incorporated Elekid into this deck. I realized that it's very powerful, right? Pokemon did not make a mistake in printing baby Pokemon or printing them excessively. And honestly, I would argue that they didn't even print them excessively. It was pretty appropriate to print them. And so, yeah, this is very strong card. And you can search it out with Miraidon. So this card is very strong in this deck, right? Saves you a lot of trainer space and stuff like that, right? So then we play one copy of Mute EX. Got the ability to restart. Once during the turn, you may draw cards until you have 3 cards in your hand. Right? So this card is very strong and just setting up a pivot because it has free retreat. So if you get knocked out, you can just push it and pivot into your next attacker. Um, and because deck has a lot of discard cards in it, you're always going to be you'll be able to use the ability a few times throughout the game, right? And yeah, so that's the main crux of the deck. Then I'll get to the other cards that I put in this deck. So play 2 copies of Teal Mask Ogrepon EX. Has the ability Teal Dance. Once during your turn, you may attach a basic grass energy card from your hand to this Pokemon. You attach an energy card to a Pokemon display, draw a card. Right. So has the attack Mirrored Leaf Shower, 30 plus for 3 grass energy. This attack is 30 more damage for each energy card attached to both active Pokemon. So Pikachu has the grass energy cost, right? So this card comboed with in a Pikachu deck is very powerful because it gives you draw support. It also gives you another option for energy attachment, basically, which we'll get into once we get to trainer cards. So yeah, and then for the tech cards for this tournament in particular, the first card I played was Minior from Paradox Rift. Has the ability Far Flying Meteor. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is on your bench, when you attach an energy card from your hand to this Pokemon, you may switch it with your active Pokemon. So basically, if this card is on the bench, if you attach an energy card to it from your hand, you can put it into the active. With even if you retreat it for the turn, you can still do that, basically. And it has the attack Gravitational Tackle for colorless energy 20x. This attack does 20 damage for each colorless in your opponent's active retreat Pokemon cost, right? So, for example, if you were going to attack a Minior with this card, Minior has 2 colorless in its retreat cost, so it would do 20x, so it'll do 40 damage, right? So, on paper, this card is kind of whatever, right? You'll probably only get about 40 damage on average with this attack. But in this format, if you've been playing this format for a while, you're familiar with this card, Snorlax from Pokemon Go. Has the ability Block. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon can't retreat. So a lot of control decks centered around this card going into Toronto were being played. So I didn't want to get caught off guard. And so I played 1 copy. So that because basically this attack to this Snorlax will do 80 damage. And since it's weak to fighting, and Minior is a fighting Pokemon, the attack is 160 damage to Snorlax. And this card has 150 HP, so it's effectively a one shot, right? So it basically sets up a board state where your opponent can't push the Snorlax without something like a Bravery Charm or a Hero's Cape, right? And so that's kind of the idea of playing this card, right? You just basically automatically win versus this deck, right? The second tech card I played was this card, Virizion V. So it has the ability Verdant Wind. Pretty wordy ability. So I'll just go through it. Each of your Pokemon that has any grass energy attached recovers from all special conditions and can't be affected by any special conditions. Right. So basically, if you have a grass energy attached to a Pokemon, if this Pokemon is in play, Pokemon cannot be affected by special conditions, basically. So going into this tournament, there was also a very popular deck going into it, centered around using this Pokemon's ability. Brute Bonnet from Paradox Rift has the ability Toxic Powder. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon has an Ancient Booster Energy Capsule attached, you may make both active Pokemon poison. So this card, in theory, would be able to effectively bypass Pikachu's ability, right? And so the idea behind playing this card is that you can attach a grass energy to Pikachu, and then even when you use the attack Topaz Bolt, you still have a grass energy attached after the overvolt discharge. So basically, you're trying to set up a board state where they can't use Brute Bonnet's ability because of this ability, right? So I didn't want to get blindsided by any cloth decks because the main attacker of this Brute Bonnet deck was cloth, right? So I didn't want to get blindsided by any of them, so I just played one copy of this card. And so that was the Pokemon count. I'll kind of explain in further detail kind of the idea behind the Pokemon counts. We go through trainers, right? So trainers, the very thin line of trainers. So you got your search cards for Ultra Ball, for Nest Ball, then um, your main draw support for this deck was Carmine, right? So has the effect, if you go first, you may use this card during your first turn, discard your hand, and draw 5 cards, right? So in this format, you can't use supporter cards in your first turn. So having this flavor text means that you can use this card on your first turn, even though it's a supporter card, right? So the idea is that with this deck, I'll kind of get more into it after I'm done explaining the trainer cards, but um, so this card just makes your turn one very strong, basically, right? Especially because you have a Luminion. You can just use Ultra Ball, search Luminion, and get this card, right? So other supporters play 2 Ionos. Iono is just a very strong supporter card in this format, so you want as many copies as you can. I only play 2 because you just want to set up, and just in case you need to play it, you have 2 copies, right? The other supporter is Crispin. Search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards of different types. Reveal them. Put one of them in your hand. Attach the other one to your Pokemon. That's shuffle your deck. So you need to target 2 different energy cards to be able to attach. You can't just search for one and just attach it. Um, and this deck plays a lot of different energies. So this card is very good in this deck, basically. Right? And then we play 1 boss's orders. Switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot. So generally, you're not going to really be using this card because you can pretty much knock out any Pokemon in the format. So you don't really need it. But because you play knocked out, you can set up some nice combos with it. So just play 1 copy, right? And the other Gust card is Countercatcher. You can use this card only if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent. Switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot. So this is an item card, and it does the same thing as Boss's Orders. So basically, lets you play other supporters and then use this card later, right? And it combos well with Magneton. So this card's very powerful in this deck. I also play 2 Night Stretchers. So this deck's a combo deck. So a card like Super Rod wouldn't be that strong in it because Super Rod doesn't really combo with any other cards in this deck. Besides maybe like Ultra Ball. So Night Stretcher is just a better card. And it also pairs well with Steel Mask Ogerpon because you can just get a grass energy for the turn and use it to use its ability. Then for the stadium, play Area Zero Underdepths. So this deck plays 4 Tera Pokemon. 2 Pikachu EX, and 2 Teal Mask Ogerpon EX. So very easy to fulfill this card's condition. You have to have a Tera Pokemon in play, and then you can have up to 8 Pokemon on your bench. All right, so this deck ends games pretty quickly, so you're not going to need a lot of copies of this card. So you're just going to set up your board, and then if they want to bump it, sure. But by the time they bump it, you'll probably be at like 3 or 4 prizes, right? So then the ace spec, play Scramble switch your active Pokemon on one of your bench Pokemon. If you do, you may move any amount of energy from the Pokemon you moved to your bench to the new active Pokemon. So basically, if your active Pokemon has energy attached, you can use it to you can use this card, and the energy attached to your active Pokemon goes to the Pokemon that switched into it, right? So for example, you have something like Teal Mask Ogerpon in active, and you just use a Teal Dance. You can use Scramble Switch, and you can move the energy onto something like a Pikachu EX, for example. Right? And Pikachu EX thrives on having a lot of energy attached to it. So, card like Scramble Switch helps you attach a lot of energy to Pikachu EX, basically. Right? And the last trainer card is Energy Switch. Move a basic energy from one of your Pokemon to another one of your Pokemon. So, again, something like Teal Mask Ogerpon, which attaches energies to it with its ability. You can use this ability. You can use this ability, attach an energy, and then you can use Energy Switch and attach it to something like Pikachu EX. Right. So that's kind of the crux of the trainer cards. Then the energy count, play 6 grass, play 6 metal, 3 metal, sorry, and we play 3 lightning. All right. So heavy grass count because of Teal Mask Ogerpon. And yeah, so that kind of rounds out the deck. And so I'll explain um kind of the concept of Pikachu, and then kind of combos that you can do with this archetype with this particular list. So I can kind of give an idea of why I played this list at Toronto. Right. So generally, you're not gonna get a Pikachu EX attack off in turn two, uh, until turn 2. So that's whatever, right? But with this list, you have trainer cards like Crispin, which can attach an energy from your deck onto a Pokemon, and then it gives you the other energy to attach for turn. So that gives you 2 energies onto the Pikachu on turn 1, right? Then if you have like an energy switch and another grass energy, since you play 6, you're gonna probably hit them. You can get an Ogerpon out, use Teal Dance, and then you can use Energy Switch. And you've charged up your Pikachu EX for the next turn, right? So the idea is that you Crispin for Metal and Lightning, and then you use Teal Dance to attach the Grass Energy, and then you use Energy Switch to attach the Grass Energy from the Ogerpon to the Pikachu. Right? It's a little complicated, but it's basically just an option you have for turn 1, basically. Right? Turn 1 going second. Right? So you play Squawk Ability EX, play cards like Miraidon so you can thin your deck, play Mew, so if your hand gets thinned down, you can restart. You play for Nest Ball, for Ultra Ball, you have a lot of outs to get in this combo in turn one, right? And so that's one combo you can do. Another combo you can do is, like I explained, you can Teal Dance to an active Pikachu, active Teal Mask Ogerpon, and then you can Scramble Switch onto a Pikachu EX, and then you can use something like Crispin to attach the Metal and Lightning, so you don't have to use Magneton to get the energies on, and just generally the idea of these trainer cards basically is that you don't have to use Magneton to um, charge up the Pikachu EX. You have multiple ways of charging up Pikachu EX, basically, right? So going into Toronto, kind of the main issue with why people weren't playing Pikachu EX, besides the fact that they probably just had a lot of practice on other decks, is that there wasn't really concepts out there to charge up Pikachu EX. So I took it upon myself to put together some concepts, and these are kind of concepts I came up with. This is the original. This is the original concept I came up with, and then I refined this list down to for optimal play for Toronto, basically. So if I wasn't playing this at like Toronto, maybe if I was playing this at a League Cup or something like that, I would probably cut the Minior, and I'd probably cut the Verizon, and I'd probably add something like a second boss's orders, and probably maybe a third Iono. All right, just so I could just have better odds and more resources. But other than that, I feel like this list was very good for Toronto. Got pretty unlucky with my matchups. Hit Dragapult round one, which is probably the worst matchup for this deck, and so that was pretty tough. And yeah, right. So kind of explain the other reason why I came to the conclusion that I should play Pikachu for Toronto is that the concept of Pikachu is that it has a very fast way to set up if you build it well, and so it's going to be able to get leads quickly, and it's going to be able to close games very quickly too. Right. So, but the thing is, the drawback, of course, is that it has a low HP, and that if you knock it out at full health, it gets HP is 10, right? So if you're setting up multiple Pikachus per game, and your opponent has a way to attack two Pokemon, for example, Dragapult, they can just knock out multiple Pokemon in one turn and take a huge prize turn, right? And you won't be able to come back, right? Because you're gonna need to use something like Overall Discharge to charge up a Pikachu, or you're gonna need like spare pieces of Crispin, Energy Switch, and maybe if you haven't used your Ace Spec, Scramble Switch, right? So this deck is very feast or famine, and I feel like that's kind of what I wanted to go into this tournament playing, because historically at regionals I play a lot of slower decks, and I've always run into a lot of situations where I games I should have won, I tied because I just ran out of time. So I didn't want that to be the situation at this Toronto. So I decided to just play a more feast or famine deck and just, let fate decide basically, if you want to put it that way, my results, right? And I finished the tournament 1-3, and then I dropped out of the tournament. And I was very satisfied with that, because if I was playing a deck that could take ties, right? or if I was playing four ties, probably would have been very miserable at that tournament because I would have had to play all day and probably not even make day two. Right? So that's pretty miserable result. So I was very satisfied with being able to just play 4 rounds, not be able to qualify for day two because I wouldn't be able to get enough points, and then just you know go home because I was in my hometown, so I could just go home, right? A lot of people traveled there, so they'd probably have to play the whole day either way. But I had the luxury of just being able to say, you know what, I can't even qualify for day two. No point in playing. So just go home, right? So I was very satisfied with that. Very satisfied with the work I put in, even though I wasn't able to make day two. It's whatever, right? Like I honestly didn't want to create a situation where I do very well at this event and then I'm pretty much not playing at regionals for the rest of the year. So I think it's much better that I didn't do well at this event compared to if I ran hot and hit a lot of good matchups and just made day two, maybe top 32 or something like that, and then this list is going viral, basically, right? So I'm very satisfied with the results, and so yeah, this is the Pikachu list I played at Toronto, 2024, and so I'll get into a couple other lists that I've come up with. So this is the second Pikachu list that I came up with after Toronto. Um, After a lot of testing other archetypes and just kind of conceptualizing different archetypes for rotation. And I feel like this list is probably one of the coolest lists that I've played in years. Um, this list is very fun. Play a lot of cool cards, a lot of fun cards, a lot of strong cards. I mean, I can't sing this deck's praises enough, right? This deck is so cool, and I hope you can appreciate it as much as I do. Um, so I'll just get right into it. Um, so this list, I call it Pikachu Goldengo, and so Goldengo is a card that came out in, so you can read this easier. Uh, this card came out in Paradox Rift, and if you play the game, you're very familiar with Goldengo. Goldengo is like the every single generation since Gen 4, Generation 4. So that was the Diamond Pearl Platinum games. They come out with like a Pokemon that isn't necessarily a legendary, but is a very notorious Pokemon. And it's whether it's its stats or its typing or its attacks or its ability or something like that. And so, in Gen 4, to kind of give a quick Pokemon history lesson, in Gen 4, they came out with Spiritomb, and its gimmick was that it had no weaknesses in that generation because it was a Ghost Dark type. So Ghost Dark has no weaknesses, and in Gen 5 they came out with Volcarona, which was a stage, which was a first stage evolution Pokemon. Um, that I think it evolved at level. I want to say I think it's either I think it's 54 if I'm not mistaken, which is a very high level for a Pokemon to evolve at. And so it was a very powerful Pokemon. Very had very high stats, and it had the attack Quiver Dance, which increased your special attack, special defense, and speed by one stage. So very powerful attack, and generally the idea is that you would have to work very hard to get to the Volcarona. But in Gen 5, you just caught the Volcarona in the overworld. So you didn't have to catch the Larvesta first, right? You'd have to breed it and then, level it back up, right? So, and then Gen 6 had um Aegislash. Uh Aegislash had the ability stance change, um, which basically gave it was basically two Pokemon in one, right? So it had its shield form. I forgot it. I think it has a specific name, but let's just call it shield form, which was more defensive. And I think it's 150 attack and 150 defense and special defense, if I'm not mistaken. And then it had its sword form, where it had 150 attack and special attack, right? So then it was also had a very good typing, Ghost Steel, and then yeah, so it was a very powerful Pokemon, and it was a second stage evolution Pokemon. So it evolved from Honedge, and then it evolved into Doublade, and then Aegislash, right? So very powerful Pokemon. Then Gen 7, Sun and Moon, you had uh Gen 7 was the can't remember exactly what the Pokemon was in Gen 7. Maybe if I remember later I'll mention it, but um yeah. So they always print these Pokemon. They always make these Pokemon throughout the sets. And Gen 8 I can't remember either. But um they always make these Pokemon throughout the games that are very just powerful, and they're not necessarily legendaries, but they kind of function like legendaries in that they're very powerful Pokemon. So Godengo is the that Pokemon for this generation, and so if you play the game, it has it's to level to evolve it. You have to you have to collect these coins throughout the overworld, and then once you get to 999, you can evolve Godengo. I forgot how you evolve it, but yeah, you evolve it, and then you get Goldengo, and then all the coins in your inventory disappear. Right, so it's a very hard Pokemon to evolve. Probably one of the hardest Pokemon history to evolve. Not counting Pokemon that you have to trade, obviously, but it has the signature attack, Make It Rain. So this is basically the Make It Rain they made for the card game, and so um what Make It Rain does in the game is that it's once you use it, your special attack drops by one stage. So the idea behind this attack, which reads discard any number of basic energy cards from your hand. This attack does 50 damage for each card you discarded in this way. Um, is that basically it's the same, effectively the same attack, right? So you use it, and then you have to basically set back up to use it again, right? It has the ability coin bonus. Once during your turn, you may draw a card. If Pokemon's in the active spot, draw one more card. Right. So these both these attacks are very powerful because they're very low main. Well, not necessarily low maintenance. The attack is not low maintenance, but the ability is pretty low maintenance. All you have to do is just have it evolved and you can draw. And so, very powerful card. It's just a very high maintenance attack because you need a lot of resources to set it back up. And so the idea behind Pikachu and Goldengo is that you have very two Pokemon that can have very low maintenance attacks, and you don't have to rely on one or the other to win you the game. You can use both, basically, right? And people have been pairing Goldengo with a lot of different cards, um, with the same kind of idea in mind. And so this is my take on Goldengo with Pikachu. And so the idea is basically that, um, sorry, uh, the idea is that basically Goldengo can draw and it can also do big attacks, right? So I'll explain kind of in the trainer count, kind of how these two Pokemon can work together. So I'll go through the accounts. So play 4 Gimme Ghoul, and the idea is that you just hit the Gimme Ghouls as early as possible, basically, so you can get your Gordengos out. Right? Play 2 Gordengo EX. Um, you're not gonna need any more because probably only gonna attack with the Gordengo maybe once or twice. So you only need 2, right? You don't want to clog your deck up with cards that you're not going to be evolving, right? Then you play the general Pikachu EX line that um, you could play, right? So the one Miraidon EX, 2 Magnemites, 2 Magnetons, the Elekid, Iron Hand EX, and then the 2 Pikachu EXs, right? Just a general Pikachu line. And you play Squawkabilly EX. So in this deck looks very high maintenance because of the attackers, right? But because these attackers do a lot of damage, you're not gonna need to attack with them too much. So it doesn't really matter if you're discarding key resources in the early game. So you can use Squawk and Seize very aggressively in this deck. So just fine to play, right? Then you play 1 Goldengo from Surfing Sparks. And I'll explain why in the train account why I play this card. But this attack card has the attack striker rich, 30 plus. Pokemon gimme a devolve from Gimme Ghoul during this turn. Attack does 90 damage, more damage, right? So it can do 120 damage for 1 energy, which is very good, right? And so this card can just set up numbers for Pikachu, for Goldengo, so you can save yourself energy. It's also a single prize Pokemon, so it can mess up your opponent's prize trade, and especially when you have a Pikachu in your deck, that's very detrimental to your opponent, right? So this card's just very powerful in this deck. Play 1 Mew EX. It's just for pivoting, and because you discard a lot, so you can draw very aggressively with this card. And yeah, that's the trainer. That's the Pokemon count. It's pretty thin, right? But generally, Goldengo and Pikachu decks don't really have very thick Pokemon lines. So for the trainer counts, uh, so right off the bat, play 4 Drayden, right? So this deck is a combo deck, and I forgot to mention that Goldengo is supposed to be a combo card. It's supposed to be a combo archetype. So this deck requires large hand size, just like something like Chempao. So you don't want to be using cards like Professor's Research and stuff like that because you're trying to build your hand up so that you can um, play the game basically. So a card like Drayden card was printed in Surgeon Sparks. Put the top 7 card to your deck. You may reveal a Pokemon and a training card you find there and put them into your hand. Shuffle the other cards back into your deck. So this effect is very powerful on a supporter. Being able to look for a trainer card and a Pokemon, any trainer card, is just very powerful, right? This card hasn't seen a lot of play yet since it's come out, but um, that's because there's cards like Irida in this format that do this effect probably much better, right? So this card hasn't really seen that much play yet because it's just outclassed generally, right? But even so, this card is probably just more stronger anyways because it can search for any trainer cards instead of just an item. They can search for any Pokemon instead of just water Pokemon, right? Especially because you're going to be drawing a lot. You're going to be seeing more of your deck, right? So then you play 4 Superior Energy Retrieval. And so this is basically how you're going to attack with Godengo multiple times, right? So, um, yeah, this card is very good. And generally, in Godengo lists that we've seen, they play 4 of these, and then maybe they play like Energy Retrieval or Night Stretcher to for this support it. But this playing it with a card like Pikachu basically means that you don't have to play it with all those extra cards because you have another attacker that's just as powerful as Godengo, right? So generally, the idea is you just play the superior energy retrievals and then you're good to go, basically, right? And other energy cards that other energy trainer cards, uh, Earthen Vessel. You use this card if you discard another card from your hand. Search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards. Feel them and put them into your hand, right? So this is just to get your energy in the early game, right? And so instead of playing something like Crispin in the other list, you can play Earthen Vessel instead. And it makes it easier for you to get your energy, and you don't have to use like a supporter card for the turn, basically, right? And Drayden can target Earthen Vessel, so card's very good in this deck. So you play 3 copies, then you play 4 Ionos. So this deck is going to be playing very long games because it has a lot of attackers, and the attackers are pretty tanky. So you want a maximum count of Iono to just maximize your value from the card throughout the game, basically, right? And so, yeah. So then for the stadium, play 3 Cycling Road. Once during each player's turn, that player may discard a basic energy from their hand in order to draw a card. Right. So this card is very powerful in this deck because you play a lot of energies, play a lot of spare energy cards. Um, and so you can get a lot of value from this card. And again, this card is very good in combo decks because it just lets you dig more, basically. So yeah, this card's very good in this deck. Play 3 copies, so you can just hit it early. You can use the rest as fodder. Right. Play 2 Boss's Orders. Yeah, so this deck, you don't want to be hidden into a lot of single prize Pokemon. So you just play a good line of Boss's Orders, and then you play 1 Pal Pad, so you can use multiple bosses per turn per game potentially. And then you play 1 Super Rod. Super Rod is very good in this deck because you play a very thin line of Pokemon like Goldengo. And so if you have to discard a Goldengo in the early game, you can just use the Super Rod to get it back because setting up 2 Goldengos is very good. So you can get through your deck quicker, basically, right? And you play your 4 nest balls, your 4 ultra balls, and that's the trainer line, right? Oh, also you have the A spec. So for this deck, I play School Up Cyclone, one of your Pokemon, and all attach cards into your hand, right? So this deck is very cool because a lot of cards complement Scoop Up Cyclone very well in this deck, right? So for example, Goldengo, it says if it's in the active spot, you may draw one more card, right? So instead of just plus one in, you can plus two cards into active, right? And if you're using Goldengo as your main attacker for the game, you can set up a board state where you have two Gimme Ghouls and a Goldengo down. You can draw with one Goldengo, you scoop up Cyclone, and then promote the other Gimme Ghoul, evolve into Goldengo, and you can draw two more, right? So Scoop up Cyclone just allows a lot of cool combos in this deck. So that's the ace spec I played for this deck, right? And I'm not going to go too much into depth in terms of other combos you can do with Scoop up Cyclone, but just know that Scoop Cyclone allows you to do a lot of combos in this deck, right? So this list plays 5 Metal Energies, 3 Lightnings, and 3 Grass, right? So you play 5 metals because you have a Goldengo, so you want to have as many metals in your deck as you can, and you play the 3 Grass and the 3 Lightnings so you can um, hit them early, so you can attack with Pikachu early, and so that you have a lot of energy to attack with Goldengo, right? So as you can see, this deck, Goldengo and Pikachu complement each other very well in a lot of ways. And so this deck I feel like is very, very cool. Um and but like as a sort of disclaimer, this deck is a very complicated deck to play. I would definitely put it in the category of decks like Chempao, where it's not a deck that some like not very experienced players should be playing, right? This is a deck that rewards good players, good experienced players. Because this deck's very complicated, has a lot of lines, and it's not for the faint of heart. This deck you'll get very miserable if you play very uh, lazily, and so I wouldn't recommend this deck for newer players. I would say this is the more deck for more experienced players to refine and make better lists with, right? And so that's kind of my recommendation. This deck can work best in one, best of three. Doesn't really matter because both Pikachu and Goldengo can thrive well in both of those scenarios. And so I feel like this deck is very powerful, very underrated, very off people's radars. And so I think this deck has got a very high power level in this format. So I kind of want to see it played a lot more. So yeah, kind of take this list and tinker with it. See if you like it. And yeah, this is Pikachu Goldengo. All right. So the last list I'm going to cover for this video, I call it Pikachu Deduction Kit. Because plays for Deduction Kit. So this list is kind of a second take on more of a faster Pikachu list. So um, this list has much less attackers. This is just kind of just Pikachu mainly attacking for the deck for the game. Um, but it has multiple ways of charging it up in the early game to facilitate Pikachu winning the game for you, basically. Right. So this list is more consistent version of Pikachu, I would say. has less combos. It's a very linear Pikachu list, so I'd recommend this list as a list that a lot. This list is for probably newer players to play to kind of learn Pikachu and get better with it. So just get right into it, right? So you just play your general Pikachu lines, your three Pikachus, two Magnemites, two Magnetons, Miraidon EX, one Miraidon EX, one Elekid, and one Iron Hands. Then you play, for this list, you play one Latias EX. So Latias EX has the ability Skyliner. Your basic Pokemon in play have no retreat costs and has two Psychic colorless for its attack. Eon Blade, 200 damage. During your next turn, this Pokemon can attack, right? So you're not going to be using the attack for this deck. You're just going to be using the ability. Um, so don't worry about the attack. But basically, when this card is in play, all your basic Pokemon have no retreat cost. So this ability is extremely powerful, right? And so it basically makes it so you can get into your Pikachus without having to pay energy cost or use cards like switch cards, right? And then for this list, play this Terapagos from Surgeon Sparks as the attack Prism Charge. Search your deck for up to 3 basic energy cards of different types and attach them to your Tera Pokemon any way you like, and shuffle your deck. Alright, so Pikachu's a Tera Pokemon. So this attack basically charges up Pikachu in one turn, right? And because you play the Latias EX, all your basic Pokemon you play have no retreat cost. So all you have to do is on turn one, you just get your Latias, get a Terapagos, and active, and then you get the Pikachu on the bench, and then you get an energy, and you're good to go, right? You'll see how easy that is when we get to the trainer counts. So we have one Squawk Ability EX, just so you have a better turn one. Play one Mew-X, and you play Squavit. So Squavit from base set has the ability Nestash. Once during your turn, you may shuffle your hand and put it on the bottom of your deck. Put any cards on the bottom of your deck in this way, draw a card, right? So you have to have at least one card in your hand to use this ability. The idea is that this deck doesn't have a lot of draw power. The only card that can draw in this deck is Mew EX. So you can combo the Squavit and the Mew, and you can basically get restart at command, basically, right? So that's kind of the idea. Play Squavit and Mew so you can draw easier, basically, right? So nothing too complicated here with the trainer account with the Pokemon line. Get into trainers, play 4 Nest Ball, 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Earthen Vessel, 4 Boss's Orders, 4 Ionos, 4 Professor's Research, 4 Pokegear. This card says look at the top 7 cards of your deck. You may reveal support a card you find there and put it into your hand. Shuffle the other cards back into your deck. Right, so it's just your deck doesn't have a lot of draw power, so this basically just uh, helps with your odds. Basically, you play 4 of each supporter, so you can hit them pretty easily. Basically, right? Play 4 deduction kit. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck and put them back in any order, or shuffle them and put them in the bottom of your deck. Right. So the idea of this card is that you play it with Squavit and Mew, and basically you can choose which card you want to draw into with the Squavit before you use restart. Or if you're just gonna use Squavit, you can see which card you're gonna draw into. So it just makes Squavit's power much more higher, basically. Right? Play Scoop Cyclone. And the reason why is because there's not really another ace spec in this deck that would really be that strong. And also this deck has very low bench space since you don't play a card like Area Zero. And so you want to just be able to set up your board very easily So, and also you can use it to reset Pikachus. So if a Pikachu gets attacked, you can just use Scoop of Cyclone and its HP gets back to full, right? Then you play 3 Cyclone Road, right? So you can draw easier, right? This deck doesn't have a lot of draw power, so Cyclone Road makes its draw power better, right? Then for the energy counts, very simple. Just play 3 Lightning, 3 Metal, 3 Grass, right? So this deck doesn't really need a lot of energies because energies don't really do anything. It's just to set up your attacks. And you play 4 Earthen Vessels so you can get into them early. So this deck is just a very fast Pikachu snipe deck, just to set up a Pikachu quickly, and then you can take quick knockouts basically all over the board, right? Because you play 4 bosses orders, so you're gonna set up quick. Then you can take knockouts very easily, right? So this is a simpler Pikachu list. Um, this list is more for best of one because it doesn't really have a lot of options. So in the long games where you're playing like 2 or 3 games in a round, you don't want to be playing a deck that only does one thing. And so that's kind of the idea of this deck. It's just a really strong best of one deck to just catch your opponent off guard and get a win in a round really quickly, right? And then you can hit decks like Regidrago, Lugia, and you have favorable matchups basically, right? So these have been my Pikachu lists. I think Pikachu overall, very like I said in the beginning of the video, very well designed card. Got a lot of potential. You know, it's the mascot for Pokemon. So I want this card to see a lot of play. So I hope people pick up on these lists and, run with them, test them, try to get better at them, take them to events. Then maybe we can see some Pikachu stuff um, popping off soon, right? So thank you for listening. This video went on pretty long, but this definitely needed a lot of coverage. So thank you, and I hope to see you in the next video.